The first question we have is just, could you please introduce yourself and explain why you are a candidate for the Oakland School Board?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Joel Velasquez. I'm a father of three. I have two proud graduates from Oakland Tech. Um, my youngest is currently at Edna Brewer in seventh grade, going to eighth grade. And my children have only attended OUSD schools. I've been a resident here for 30 years in Oakland, and I've been in District 6 for almost 9 years. Um, and I'm running for really a layer of reasons, but I really think that it's time for our school board to really reflect and represent not only our district, but our citywide, and making sure that we have school board members that really represent the people in those districts and their voices on what they need and what they want as far as a school district, and and most importantly, our students. Um, so I don't know if you guys want me to elaborate a little bit more on that, but I'll kind of pause there for a second.
Great, thank you.
So I have the next question, which is what current programs and proposals do you feel are successful, and what would you keep and build on? What would you cut?
So let me start from the back part. I am I am not right now, for context, and this may be included in another question. When we say the word cut, I think there's a trigger for a lot of families and parents and community members, teachers across the board. I don't believe right now, and let me rephrase that, there is not a budget deficit in our district. And something that we don't really talk about and say, and we need to start saying it, is that our state does not have a budget deficit. There's a 90 billion plus surplus right now in our state. So I think we got to get out of the mindset that we need to cut anything. But to the first part of the question, I'm not aware of any programs right now that I would feel or have a discussion around cutting. If anything, we are moving towards providing more resources and more programs for our students across the city, including some of the extra money that's been recently submitted specifically from Oakland for community schools. And so there's a bigger conversation around what does sustainable community schools look like? And that really needs to happen. There really needs to be a discussion there. Again, I want to emphasize the part that we're not in a deficit. We don't have a budget crisis. We need to stop kind of letting our community and our teachers and our families and our children kind of have this feeling that we're fighting over scraps. That's not, we have to change that stigma. We have to change our mindset around that we live in a state that is doing extremely well and historically has been doing extremely well. And again, we have a $90 billion surplus. And maybe we can wrap this up at the end, but my plan is to not only go to the state level and increase our ADA funding from a state level for all students across California, which ultimately affect our students here in Oakland. But that hasn't been done, and we need to start working together as a city, as a community, to really start having that conversation.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joel. Could you speak a little bit more about which specific programs in OUSD you feel that have been the most successful?
Well, I'm going to speak from, two of my children were IEP programs, SPED programs. So I got to talk about that. If you guys are looking for something specific, please interject. But I do believe, and I think this doesn't get talked about enough, we definitely need more resources and funding in those programs. But I have to say that both of my children have been done tremendously well with the IEP, the SDC classes, and everything that's that wraparound resources and that's important to call out. I feel like a lot of times we talk about the deficiencies and we don't really uplift Oakland or some of these programs that do exist. And again, as a father now for two children, one that's graduated and one that is currently in a program, she is receiving anything and everything. And kudos to the teachers, to the program, not just at Edna Brewer, not just at Tech, not just at Westlake that they have attended, but this is, I think, something that Oakland and OUSD actually does a really good job of. I know there's some gaps and opportunities that we can improve on, but again, my personal experience with two of my children for the last almost 2 decades has been nothing but a positive experience. So I have to uplift those teachers and those programs in OUSD.
Thank you. Our next question for you is, will you commit to rejecting donations and support from privatization linked organizations such as Go Public Schools and the California Charter School Association?
Yeah, you can stop right there. Absolutely. No, no way, no how. For those of you that don't know me, I'm sure the folks in the PIC meeting know, but for those of you that may not know my name or know where I come from or what I'm about, as a father, I led the sit-in at Lakeview 10 years ago. And again, there's another segue around the Parker sit-in liberation right now that's going on 10 years later, that's down the street from my house. So let's be clear that a charter school sits in Lakeview Elementary. A charter school took over Lazier. A charter school took over Thurgood Marshall. So I'm going to name names. Jonathan Klein, Jessica Stewart, that used to be a director and involved with Go, reached out to me back in 2012 and wanted me to organize parents to create a charter school. We had organizations from LA coming to get me to do that. I'm not playing this game anymore. Whether it's Go Public Schools or Bloomberg or any private money that's coming into our elections, the community around in and around Oakland, not just for District 6, needs to understand that that needs to stop. That's why the voices of our communities and our children and our parents and family and teachers haven't been heard, because we have people making policies being paid by people that are trying to privatize and push our charter school system. And I don't have a timer up, sorry if you can put that up, but I need to say one last thing about that. I want to be clear, the conversation around charter schools needs a shift. The parents and the students are not adversaries. People with private money and billionaires are dividing our communities. It's race baiting and trying to create a divide within our own communities, and that has to stop. We are looking for the same thing and the same outcomes for our children and our family and our communities. We cannot have a two-tier system that closes public schools and replaces them with charter schools without having a discussion. That time in Oakland is gone. And one quick message on this, or note on this, and maybe this is related to another question. Right now, I believe there's a policy being developed by Director Hutchinson that becomes a school district policy that we are not accepting any more applications for charters, because we already have 40 plus in our district. So that needs to be noted. That needs to be put on notice. And if I'm elected in District 6, I definitely would support something like that and would encourage something like that and would vote for something like that.
Thank you.
Our next question for you is, what is the role of the school board? What is the role of an individual school board director? And what should the relationship be between the board and the superintendent?
So this was a question I just applied for the temporary seat for District 6 that's going through the process right now. So the school board, maybe folks don't know this. It seems like it's people should, but just in case, this is our democratic process and our democracy in work, right? Our communities elect officials like myself to represent them and be their voice. So that's what the school board's position, elected officials. I personally believe that one of the most important public offices that you can hold is a school board seat, because it directly impacts our children, our families, our communities across the city. It affects not just education and their well-being or resources. So that's my personal feeling around that. And as far as the question, the latter about the superintendent is hired and fired by us. Let's be really clear. She's an employee of the district, okay? So we direct her, we create policies. Yes, there should be a healthy relationship and there should be an alignment with the school board and the superintendent. But again, we as elected officials speak up and protect our school district and run it and create policies that our families in our community and our city want to see. And I think that's something that I said this a few months ago at a rally at a march. I think OUSD needs a lesson in democracy right now. I think there's been policymakers and board members that have been pushing privatizing kind of policies, and that day is over. That's coming to an end this election cycle. I believe that with all my heart.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next question is, do you commit to voting against any school closures? And other than school closures, what are 3 specific ways you can respond to possible funding shortfalls in the budget?
So this might be tied into a comment earlier. So I said earlier, I think in question 1, thank you for the timer. So the state of California is not in a budget crisis. And let's be very, very specific. OUSD, just from the last school board meeting just a few days ago, acknowledged that there is not a budget crisis. We are not a budget deficit. We are showing that we're going to have a surplus. So these discussions of school closures need to end now, immediately. And so and again, the folks that are listening at home or maybe viewing this may have a different learning curve or different understanding. So I just want to be really clear. That's not rhetoric. Those are facts. Those are numbers and data from our own district. And then I'm sorry, there was a second part of that question. What was that?
Other than school closures, what are 3 specific ways you can respond to possible funding shortfalls in the budget?
Yeah, so I mentioned this in the first question. So right now, as of right now, OUSD is been earmarked under the community schools through the state for additional funding, which and I don't remember the exact amount, so this may not be accurate, but it's somewhere around 7 million per year, and somewhere tops out around, I think the number is around 61. I need to go back because this is still fairly new. I believe this was passed back in February. And again, this is coming to OUSD. This is not something that we're asking for. So with that said, why are we having discussions around school closures, again, in a city that doesn't have a budget deficit, that has additional money coming in, specifically like for schools like Parker that are being closed right now, that the community is reopened physically, that I've been part of right now since the last day of school. This is something that we need to move away from. I feel like the discussion around school closures has to end, but then more importantly, we need to start talking about what is properly funding our public education system in California, and what does our education system look like, and how do we provide extra and additional resources with this money to the communities that need it the most. Let's be really clear here. I believe this nationally, every town, every community in Oakland deserves a local school, public school to go to. I believe that. But it shouldn't be just the schools in the hills and only the schools on the flatlands being impacted and being closed. And let's be really clear. I don't know what my timer is again, sorry. But let's be really clear. There's an ACLU complaint right now on Rob Bonta's desk right now. And some of my statements around my kids' traumas and exposure to this, school closure discussion is that it's disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities in Oakland. And they've been doing it now for almost 20 years. This is like year 19. Has been continued. So I think this is an important topic, but I also think it's important for us to recognize that this has been pushed by privatizers while charter schools are opening in our own spaces, and that needs to end. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you see as the effects of charter schools on OUSD students? And what do you believe should be the relationship between OUSD and the charter sector?
So there's a big debate, right? I don't think we've had this conversation nationally, right? So just for clarity, I'm one of the founding members for Journey for Justice nationally. I've had the privilege to testify with Director Hutchinson in 2013 in DC with the Department of Education to talk about a moratorium on school closures nationally, because this is happening across the nation, right? We see New Orleans, where now it's just a charter school district and there is no public education system. We said this 10 years ago. So I think there's a much, much, much bigger debate here that I think is a healthy debate, but it needs to be had. We're doing this without a debate nationally, and that needs to be had, right? What do we really think our public education system should look like? With that said, I believe that the system that's in place, our public education system, where the public is in control of it, in those communities, in those districts, to get the guide, the learning process is really the way it should happen. Okay. And the other part to that is that you talk about a relationship. Look, there's been multiple uh, judgments uh, legally that say charter schools are not public schools under our own definition. So without falling into the weeds with this, are charter schools really public? And should they be receiving public funding with no oversight from the public? I mean, that's a very serious question that we need to have, not just in Oakland, but nationally.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question is, how would you partner? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's Myra's question. Okay, here's your next one. Could you describe some examples and sources of environmental racism in your district in D6 and say how they have affected OUSD students, parents, and educators? What commitments can you make toward combating the disproportionate impacts of pollutant exposure on OUSD students, parents, and educators?
Now, that's a really good question. So, well, let me just say, so we've had water tested in sites where the lead levels were not at acceptable levels. And until today, OUSD has not really addressed that. And the way they're doing the testing, instead of doing it in a transparent way, has kind of changed the outcomes of those tests and the data to make it appear that the lead levels are actually acceptable, at McClymonds. So I don't know if we need any more examples than that one alone. I mean, we have children and families and teachers at this site. Why in the world will we not take a scenario like that and take it serious and really address it and come to a resolution in a reasonable amount of time? I think OUSD is failing on addressing that one example. I know it's not the only example in the district, but I only have limited time to talk about that. And I just thought that was a really good example of that OUSD being notified that lead is in the water. And then, I mean, I lost track of time. The timeline has been way, way longer than anything reasonable to find a resolution for something like this. And that's talks a little bit about the broken culture, I think, within OUSD, that we need strong leadership to kind of guide and change and let them know this is just not acceptable.
Thank you. Your next question is, how would you partner with the Oakland community, so students, families, educators, classified staff, unions, community organizations, etc., around issues facing our schools, in particular when making controversial or difficult decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, we again, this isn't rhetoric. Anyone that knows me knows that something that I do, one of my biggest gifts is getting the people in the room and getting people to work together. That's not always an easy thing in our communities, and I understand that. And I understand that sometimes we work in silos. This isn't something specific to Oakland. We see the same challenges in other cities across the nation. I've been fortunate to sit in those meetings with leaders from each city, and we talk about how do we organize with the unions, with the parents, with the students, and with other organizations within our city or even our state. So I don't think that's unique to Oakland, but anyone that knows me knows that my heart and my soul goes into issues around public education. I've done all of that as a volunteer. I've never been paid a dime for anything that I've done, whether it's a sit-in, whether being involved with the sit-in at Parker now, connecting the dots and connecting people is what I do. And fortunately, I've been in Oakland for 33 decades, and I'm fortunate to know folks from across the city that know and trust me as a person, my name and who I am as a human being, more importantly, and know me as a father and as a parent, that I'll do anything it takes to help my families, my children in this community wide. Anything that makes our public education system stronger and better and keeps us moving forward is what I've been trying to, be part of. And maybe, I hope I didn't wander too far away from the question, but the number one thing to get us, all of us, and we need to start right now, everyone that's even, that's going to be listening to this, we got to work together. We got to find the common ground, the places that we agree, and stop talking about the things that we don't agree on. There are so many things that our communities want together and can find the common ground. And I believe if I got to be the glue to do that, then so be it. And again, yes, I'm in District 6, but we need this to be a citywide movement. Hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, our last question is just an offer to you if you would like to make any closing remarks.
Yeah, well, again, thank you both for letting me, answer some questions and get folks to have a little better feel of me. Of course, with a few questions and a couple minutes, it's not going to give you a full.
Oh, I think you're muted.
In June, the next few weeks. But more importantly, I just want everyone to know that I'm not a politician. I've been asked by organizations and folks in my communities around Oakland to step up and do this. And I don't take this decision lightly. I'm still a full-time father, single father, with a daughter, 13, soon to be 14-year-old daughter that needs me. But this is so important to our community, and to make sure that we have someone that we know and trust in that position, not just for District 6, but all the board seats that are coming up available this election cycle and hopefully moving forward. So I just want everyone to know that I'm not being paid by anyone. No one has told me to do this as part of any specific organization. I'm doing this literally because out of my heart and my desire, I have one desire before I leave this planet. And this sounds dramatic. If I have one accomplishment in my lifetime, besides being a great father, I hope I did that one. The second one would be to improve OUSD to be at least one of the best school districts in our state, if not the best. And that's not rhetoric. That is literally something that I feel that I will spend the rest of my lifetime doing to make sure that we accomplish that for our children and families in this city.
Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you.
I'm going to